Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Unreal Season 2 Episode 3. It's called Guerilla. So spoilers for the episode, and we're definitely noticing a theme in all the titles of the episode so far. And glancing ahead, it seems like all the titles being related to war and combat are going to be holding true. So this is a Patreon sponsored review. Thank you to Board Now for picking the show, and I feel like this show keeps... I shouldn't be surprised, or I shouldn't be impressed at the new layers of which Rachel or Quinn can go to manipulate someone. I shouldn't really be surprised anymore. And yet, in some ways, I feel like they find new ways to do it. Maybe that'll run out at some point, but at least here, early season 2, Quinn's dirty tactics in this episode did... I won't say it caught me. It didn't catch me by surprise in the sense that I didn't figure it out. I actually realized what the trick was before they revealed the trick. I kind of just had an inkling for whatever reason that there was something up. But at the same time, though, just the fact that they were doing it, as much as I was able to predict it once it was happening, it wasn't like I thought this was going to be something that was in the playbook before it happened. So, I'm not really sure exactly what I'm trying to say here, except that I'm both not surprised and surprised at the same time. And I guess that's... I guess it kind of feeds into the idea that you can not be surprised at the worst in humanity, but you can hope for better. And then they remind you how bad they really are. Yeah, there's big things in this episode. Obviously, we're developing this new character, Coleman, who's now in charge, that's been put in charge by the exec, who I think is Gary. I think that was his name. He's just the executive. He's the guy from the TV network, whatever. Doesn't really matter. The thing with him this episode is that very early on, it's like, okay, is there some romantic inklings between him and Rachel? It feels like an obvious path to go down. He seems impressed by her, the way she's able to kind of like analyze people and play them. There's a sequence early on where he's kind of acting a little bit hoity-toity about reality TV and saying it's lowest common denominator, that it's kind of depressing that he's here because this is just vapid stuff for people with bad taste, or that wasn't the exact wording, but he was kind of saying that sort of thing, where he's made some documentaries and shows that are really, he thinks, important, that he cares about, that he's an auteur about. And this is a bit more trash TV. And Rachel kind of points out how good they are at manipulating the girls because she manipulates him into talking about why he broke up with his girlfriend. That he maybe got dumped, and that maybe it's the first time he's ever just not got what he wanted because he's used to being the rich boy who got everything handed to him. He's got a trust fund, all those other things. So we'll learn a lot about him as it plays throughout the episode. So he's kind of, taken aback and impressed by that. And then later on, he has that great line when he sees Quinn doing what she's doing. We'll get into that main plot in a bit, but there's a line where he says, okay, Rachel is good, because he sees Quinn do something first that sets something up, and then Rachel goes in for the kill, quote unquote, and sort of sets up the final part of the plan. And he says, oh damn, she's good, but both of you together is terrifying. So I like that there's someone new who's kind of acknowledging that them as a force are absolutely scary in how they are able to shape people into what they want them to be, especially in this case where the end game is entirely negative. Because as much as it feels like there's moments of humanity in Rachel, maybe not so much Quinn, admittedly, but certainly in Rachel, there's occasional moments where it's like, oh hey, she actually helped someone get through something, even if it's kind of got an ulterior motive for the show. Or maybe sometimes we'll have a little win where she won't put it on the show just because it was the right thing to do, right? There's a couple of little moments that have been like that in season 1. I'm thinking the stuff with helping, was it, all the names of the season 1 girls are escaping me. Was it Grace was the name of the character who was closeted in season 1? And there were some actual nice vibes with some of that stuff. Here, though, what they do is pretty monstrous, not just because they're setting someone up for failure and they're setting someone up to have an emotional outburst on camera just for pure entertainment's sake, but it's actually quite, like especially mean-spirited. It's because it's effectively making someone look crazy and not be believed or trusted by those around. And while the character in question, the MMA or mixed martial arts fighter character that kind of is the focus of this episode, she like does something wrong early on. Quinn pulls a few strings early on, says she's going to produce a couple of the girls, and she intentionally tells her that this other girl, or she doesn't belong here, or something. Well, I can't even remember what she says to her. But she puts the eyes in her head that it's every girl for herself, and that she has to fight to get what she wants, blah, 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 right? Something like that. And I remember what she said to the other girl. She went to the, Chantal was the other one she went to, and specifically said, hey, that character, she was saying you don't deserve to be here because you're this or you're that. And she's trying to like stir the pot a little bit. And it almost felt like it was too amateur hour for Quinn. Like, this is how good Quinn is at doing this. Like, because you suspect that she's great at it because Rachel's like her protege, and we see how good Rachel is at it, so you expect her to be great, and she is. But up front, it looks a little bit amateur, where she's just basically saying she said something about you. So at first, it doesn't seem that impressive, but it results in Chantel being pulled down by the MMA fighter when they're doing an obstacle course. Which why are they doing an obstacle course? Because this is Chet's crazy idea, and he had the reins at the start of the episode. But that quickly changes after this, once Coleman starts seeing the manipulation happening, and he says, all right, Quinn, you've got the rest of the day, get results. So she pulls her down, and she gets hurt, has a concussion, and it makes her look quite bad. And Quinn orders her to go into the hole, which is basically a cell, right, which they lock, and she starts freaking out in there because she has claustrophobia, she has issues. There was a whole sequence earlier when Quinn went to the therapist and said, okay, who's got problems? And this girl stuck out. The fighter stuck out. And it kind of fits in with her character, why she got into mixed martial arts in the first place, is because she has the signs of a backstory where she was assaulted by parents, or foster parents in this case. There's an abusive backstory there in all likelihood. And that's what Quinn's trying to exploit. And is intentionally putting her in a cell, which is making her freak out. And then Rachel's the one that comes in a little bit later and says, yeah, no one's going to care why you did it or that you want to apologize. You did it. But the only way you're going to actually get anywhere is because you've won this date by winning that assault course, which is what the whole thing was for in the first place. So this is your chance to maybe win over the suitor, to win him over. And if you can't, if Darius doesn't feel like you're being genuine with him, he'll probably get rid of you. And this is all just Rachel trying to manipulate her into actually talking about her past, because up until this point, she doesn't want to talk about it. She keeps it to herself, and seemingly, not just in here, it seems to be something that she keeps to herself in general. It's not something she wants to open up about. So we get this whole sequence where she sits down with Darius, and she opens up about foster care, about how the foster mothers weren't that kind to her, and the fathers were even worse. Some of them were abusive and demanded she do chores around the house, and would get angry when they weren't to the dad's liking. And she doesn't get into any sort of physical actually no, she does. She talks about getting burned. That is physical abuse. What I mean to say, she doesn't specifically mention sexual abuse is what I was trying to get at, but that doesn't necessarily say it doesn't happen. It's just that she didn't specify that. Maybe that's just a step too far to open up about. Maybe it didn't happen. Maybe it was just pure regular abuse. That feels like a weird phrase, but she opens up all about this, and Darius reveals that he has a cousin or something like that went through the foster system, so he knows how tough it can be. And he comforts her. They end up kissing, and he kind of holds her close, and it's all kind of a neat thing. And Quinn is yelling about how great this is. She's like, oh, great, I'm so hard now. This is fantastic. Give me the Emmy. But immediately she says, oh, okay, it's time to initiate phase 2. Or that wasn't the line, but that's effectively what she said. And they bring Darius to her office, and there's a woman there that she introduces as the MMA fighter's mother, and says, this is her mother. Turns out, we didn't know this, but she's a serial liar. And she says things to get attention. She was never in foster care, and the wounds are heavily implied here to be self-inflicted. And he obviously feels very hurt by this, and it leads to him ejecting her at the end of the episode, but not 4 women that he was supposed to. He basically says, oh, I've discussed it with them and they're letting me only get rid of 1 person, and it's going to be you because you lied about foster care and I can't have someone who would lie to me. You know, clearly you're going through things, but honesty is important and I can't have that. So you're not for me. And when he specifically when she starts saying, of course, I didn't lie, I told you the truth. He points out, look, your mother's standing over there. Your entire story is a fabrication. And of course, and if you haven't clocked it by now because I've not said it yet, this is all a lie. This woman's not her mother. She's an actress. Her story, as far as we know anyway, is completely true. And Quinn's brought in an actress to convince Darius that it's a lie. So this makes her act out and she starts yelling, I've never seen that woman before. This is all a lie. They're making me look bad. And jumps on Darius's back and looks like a psychopath because she's freaking out and she's physically jumping on the suitor, and they have to get security in to pull her off and all the rest of it. And it's hard not to feel bad for her because clearly she has some issues. She did pull the other girl down earlier on, right, which is kind of aggressive. This is also like maybe acting out a bit more extreme than perhaps someone more level-headed would in the situation to try and like keep calm and convince everyone. But it's also true that she has been completely pushed into this both times, especially this time. Like the first one's maybe a little bit of a stretch, but this outburst was absolutely manufactured. Maybe it was more extreme than they were expecting it would be, but it is absolutely manufactured. And it's this idea again that they've learned nothing from what happened to Mary last season, where they have pushed someone who clearly has mental issues, and not like a mental illness way. I just mean mental issues in that they have something, they have something traumatic in their life that is a sensitive spot that is actively cruel to push them into it more so. And it reminds you once again just how villainous the lead 2 characters in this show can be. Quinn especially has never really shown much remorse for a lot of this. Rachel has in the past, but it kind of feels like she's completely reverted into evil mode. Certainly since the end of last season, it feels like she has left any sympathy she might have had behind, to an extent anyway. So yeah, so that's like the main story of the episode. There's a couple of little offshoots to it that are kind of interesting that I do like from a character development point of view. After Chantal goes down and gets concussed, they do a whole scene where Darius goes to visit her in their hospital room, right? It's not really a hospital room, but they make it look kind of like one. And he comes in with balloons and all that, and he says to Rachel before he goes in, yeah, no, I'm going to go off in there and charm the pants off her and, make her feel loved and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, so he's very confident in what he's about to do. But the thing is that when he says all these nice things to her and she's very receptive towards it, and she's basically saying that, waking up in his arms after the injury it made her realize how special he was. And she's having this real moment. He leans in and he kisses her. It's a sweet moment. But as he's like finishing the kiss, he looks over at the camera and basically, he doesn't wink, I don't think, but he just kind of glances at the camera with a knowing look of like, yeah, I just did that. I know what I'm doing. And that was me playing the game. Like, he is not being genuine right now. And I thought that was an interesting little moment. Because I think it doesn't make him unlikable per se. At least not... Like, I don't think he's a monster for this. I think it just shows that he's willing to play the game that it's been laid out in front of him. He's willing to do it in a way that I don't think Adam ever felt like he was willing to just try and manipulate people to be victorious. It feels like Darius is willing to do that a little bit and kind of get into the role that they want him to play. Of course, there's some other things going on with him this episode. There's kind of some teases early on that he won't do any of the physical stuff, like the assault course, because Chet wants him to do it first to show the girls how it's done, and he doesn't want to do it, and it's kind of hinting at some stuff. So after his back's jumped on later on, by someone who's a trained fighter, might we add. I've forgotten her name, so I keep calling her MMA Girl, because she's obviously gone from the end of this episode. But he has a little moment of pain, and he kind of shrugs it off. But the cliffhanger at the end of the episode is that he is actually down. Like, his back's like... I mean, I'm sure it's more than just thrown out, but that's kind of what it made me think of, is he's on the bed holding his back, and clearly he's having trouble getting up and walking around, and this is part of the image that he's trying to maintain and hide is this. Because he won't let Rachel see him the night before, but obviously whatever pain he's got is worse in the morning, so she has to find out about it. So that's an interesting development going forward, and this idea, again, of putting out the projection of what you want the world to see and then what you really are, because that's such a big theme of this show. The entire idea of reality TV about putting out an image of what everyone is when the reality of who they all are is very different. Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, so on and so on. As I'm being dinged. So, what I would say, I think there's more depth to Darius because of this, and not just because he's got this other thing with the injury at play. That is interesting in its own right, but I think him being willing to play the game a little bit is a little different from Adam, and I appreciate that, on top of all the obvious differences that they're playing with him being the first black suitor, and how that's clashing with maybe the racist girl or the black activist girl or so on and so on. But speaking of Ruby, our activist character, she has a little bit here in this episode. It starts off pretty much the same as it has been, where Jay's saying, "Hey, you need to dress up, put the cleavage out a little bit." Maybe try not just be an activist in personality, like 100% of the time. Just be someone having fun and try to flirt for 10 minutes. Maybe try that. And she's clearly struggles with that. It's just not who she is. But the kind of the reveal in this episode is that when she does see everyone dressed up for a party at the end of the day, and she feels vastly underdressed because she doesn't own anything like that, she pulls Hot Rachel aside, that name's sticking, and says, "Hey, can I borrow a dress? I have nothing to wear." And she does. She's nice. She's nice about it. And there's a little moment where Ruby looks in the mirror and kind of seems to like that she looks good. And she walks down the stairs. Darius seems to be quite receptive to how she looks. He starts complimenting her. And immediately the racist girl jumps in and starts interrupting, and they have some words thrown back and forth. The important thing is, though, is that Jay pulls her aside and realizes that she's getting hot really easy whenever she's confronted, maybe because she actually likes the guy, right? She actually likes Darius, and as a result, she's getting her buttons are being pushed maybe a bit easier than they should be because she actually maybe likes the guy a little bit. So basically all just comes down to him saying, "Hey, you're the smartest one here," and that's something that Hot Rachel even said to her, is like, "Why are you here? You seem too smart for all this." And notably, I think it's a nice line where Ruby hits back with that comment from Hot Rachel. She says, "We're all too smart for this." Now, I don't know if that's literally true in the case of, the racist one, who does seem really ditzy, but I do like the sentiment that she's getting at there, because she's basically saying we're all better than this, right? It's kind of demeaning that we're all doing this dumb show where we're trying to win the man and we're trying to be sexy. It's all a little bit demeaning, and that's clearly how she feels. And it is contrasted with literally a minute later, 30 seconds later even, where she's kind of looking at herself in the mirror and she's enjoying the fact that she looks kind of good, and maybe it's, awakening something that she's not really explored too much. She's still pretty young after all. I mean they're all pretty young, but she's 21, 22, something like that. So it's, I think it's interesting to bring that idea up of her in a little moment, right? Because we focus so much on the fact that she's a black activist that we maybe forget that she's also a feminist activist as well. Not that they've said that, but I think that little line there kind of said to me that she also thinks about that, and she's thinking about, she was effectively propping up every other woman there in that moment. That was her default response to that, and she was saying, no, she didn't quite spell it out, but she was basically saying back to Hot Rachel, no, you're not dumb enough for this either. You might think you are, but you should think higher of yourself. So there's kind of a sweet sentiment in there from that line, but it also ties wonderfully back into the themes that we're playing constantly with Rachel and Quinn, which is the other big thing of this episode, obviously, is the developments between them, and then also a little bit of Coleman, which we're kind of I started off by talking about them, and it kind of fed into the plot, so I'm kind of whipping back round now, which is this idea, even the previously on at the start, it goes back to the opening scene of the season, which is them getting the tattoos. Money, dick, power, they're in solidarity with each other, they're got each other's backs, and of course, by the end of episode 2, Rachel was going behind her back to talk to Gary. And that kind of like happens here with Quinn again, where she goes to talk to Gary. After they've shot the episode and she's quite proud of it, she phones Gary and says, hey, we did a great episode, but it was me. It was my ideas. I pulled this off. Send your boy home who's keeping tabs on everyone. And it's kind of beautiful that she basically goes through the exact experience that Rachel went through at the end of the last episode. Because the end of the last episode, they get told from Gary, hey, clearly there's problems here. Someone else needs to be in charge. And Rachel was sitting there thinking that she was about to be put in charge, only to be sidelined and told, no, here's this new guy, Coleman. He's in charge now. The exact same thing happens to Quinn in this episode, because the next morning, after this phone call, Gary comes in, fancy sports car. Quinn jokes that he must have a small dick, which I did laugh at, because the car is very much midlife crisis. Look at my beautiful car. And he makes this whole big speech about how the show that he just watched the dailies of is the best they've ever done. He's very proud, and it's all thanks to one person. And I think everyone watching this knows that he's not going to say Quinn. She's got a smirk in her face. It's clearly building up to something else. And he says, Coleman, here's your prize car as a present to you for doing such a good job. And he throws him the keys. And like the performance in Quinn's face is really good throughout the whole scene. Like her performance as she's reacting to this and biting back her tongue. Although when Gary says, hey, Quinn, a word, she immediately says, what is this sucker punch bullshit? You know, she kind of like brings it up in a way that Rachel maybe didn't quite have the balls to do. And he's like, look, you delivered that show because there's someone here making sure you do your job properly, and that's Coleman. Now, we can, as an audience, debate if that's true or not, but he does bring up a very valid point that her second in command, Rachel, went behind her back to come and talk to him and tells her this, and Rachel can clearly see from a distance that she's probably finding this out because she gets pretty worried immediately. But he's like, hey, get your house in order, and maybe then we can talk about you being in charge, but until then, you clearly don't know how to, run your people and keep them in line. So that sets up that stuff. But what I really like about it is her being blindsided the exact same way as Rachel was last time. It's beautiful symmetry, because one of the things that keeps coming up throughout this episode, it's not like one particular scene, it's just something that Quinn says a few times throughout, is the idea that she would be given all the same chances and success and praise that Coleman's been given if she was a guy. She says that a couple times. If I had if I was a guy, I would be banging 22-year-olds, and Rachel's like, yeah, hot 22-year-olds. They basically comment on the idea that he's been handed a bunch of stuff because he's a guy, and that Gary's giving him all this stuff and treating him very differently to both of them. And there's kind of some proof in the pudding here, where he's basically pulled the exact same sucker punch move on both of them. Obviously, Quinn's was a bigger escalation, where it's now the car and all that, but it's effectively the same thing, just turned up a few notches. They've both been hit with the exact same thing, which should only be further solidifying and emphasizing the fact that they should be sticking together, because clearly they are going to keep getting screwed over. And them being against each other is just making things worse. It's just breaking their friendship down. It's just going to make them more vulnerable targets for the male-dominated corporate world, which they keep getting beat down by. But right now, Rachel's scared of Quinn and wants to run, and Quinn is out for blood. It feels like they are not there for each other right now. They don't have each other's back. And once again, we're back down to a point in this show where I'm like, are these two actually good for each other? Because it feels like they're toxic. It feels like a toxic relationship. So while I'm talking on one hand about how they need to be there for each other, women supporting women, at the same time, they might actually be the worst possible people for each other because of just who they are and how they actually try and do all this stuff. And Quinn brings out arguably some of the worst things in Rachel, and you could even argue that Rachel even would only get the idea to do what she did to try and go behind her back because she learned those ideas from her. That Quinn's, because Quinn did this multiple times last season where she tried to go around chat. I think it's quite easy to say that Rachel has taken on, whether it's consciously or not, has taken on some of that mantra and ideas and is trying to do the same thing. She's literally just doing Quinn's playbook when she tries to go behind her back. But Quinn, of course, is going to be I assume pretty pissed, at least for a while. So there's that. But there's an extra wrinkle added into all this, which is that when Rachel's trying to run away, she's going to leave the show because she knows Quinn's going to kill her. Coleman, who already in the episode was complimenting her and saying, why are you here? Your skill set's more important than this dumb show. You could be doing more important things. I'll even lend you some money from my trust fund. Now, whether or not he was being semi-serious or that was just a joke that Rachel kind of reacts to it as, is maybe open for debate. But at the end of the episode, he comes in here, catches her trying to leave and says, hey, you do not need Quinn. You're extremely good at this. Like, Quinn and Chet, they're dinosaurs. They can do everlasting, but that's all they can do. We can go do important things. We're younger. We can do all sorts. And he kisses her. She kisses him back. They get kind of hot and heavy. And it's the sort of thing where, like, if you told me she was going to have a new love interest, like a proper love interest so quickly, I might have, like, groaned at the idea of it. But I actually completely get why this is immediately happening, because he's kind of coming in as this other potential avenue for success. And I'm not saying she's just sleeping with the guy to get ahead. I'm not saying that. I'm saying she is actively turned on by the fact that this guy is saying that she can be bigger than Quinn, that she has a bigger future. Now, it might all come back and bite her. The harsh lesson later down the line in this season might very well be that she should never have, like, put trust in this guy helping her, because ultimately maybe he won't do that or won't want to, or turn his back on her for some reason down the line. I don't know, right? I don't know where we're going with that. But in the meantime, it is interesting now that Quinn's out for Rachel's blood, seemingly, but she's kind of become, like, close with the boss. Like, Coleman's the one in charge right now, and presumably might, like, shield her from Quinn. And I don't know, like maybe there's an interesting dynamic there at play where Quinn probably wants to lay down the law with Rachel and wants to stop Coleman from saying, you know what, Rachel's getting more responsibility and you're getting less, Quinn. I don't know if he necessarily has the power to, like, switch their roles around necessarily, but it feels like at the very least he's going to be something that gets in the way of that warpath initially. I could be wrong, but that's at least what it felt like to me was one of the excitement developments of this coming out of it. And all of this, comes back round to this idea of, if we're talking about the women being overstepped by the men and not getting the same chances despite all the things they try and do to make the best show, to prove that they're worth more, to prove that they're more talented. And then part of the problem is that they are at each other's throats now. Almost like the system is designed to pit women against each other, and that's part of the whole thing as well. And they are now kind of at odds in some form or another. So that's one element of it. And then the element of it that I think gives it some bite and some nuance is that it's not this, like, simple good and evil thing either. Because obviously everything I'm saying about the male-dominated system and them being held down by it, that all sounds like they are the heroes of the show, and the men in charge are the villains, right? Whether it was Chet last season or more so Gary this season. And I'm not saying they're not villains in a sense, right? But I don't think that our main characters are just good heroes either. Like, what they do to the people on this show is kind of awful. And that makes them more interesting and layered, right? This is very much a show where there's very few just genuinely good characters. There's a lot of shitty people, and there's, like, moments of, like, humanity seeping through, but there's also a lot of shitty stuff as well. And it's almost kind of like you want to root for them, but then they do something where you're like, oh, you deserve some comeuppance for what you just did. And it pulls you kind of, like, backwards and forwards a little bit on that. And I think that makes them more compelling characters. And it's nice because they're flawed. They're very flawed. Like, these are very flawed characters, and not just, like, the good character you sympathize with that you want to root for to win. Sometimes that's the right move. Like, sometimes you want the earnest hero in the story. But this is quite an interesting show because the two female leads are very complex in that they have a lot of faults. In some ways, they might have more faults than they do good qualities, and depending on the episode we're watching, and it makes them a bit more compelling. So, yeah, that's most of the important stuff. There's a couple of little things here or there, like Hot Rachel was kind of flirting with Jeremy at one point. There was just a little moment, but I assume that's maybe going somewhere. We don't focus on some of the other girls too much this episode, but I guess the other thing that I'll mention is that the racist girl, was her name Tiffany? That sounds like it might be right. Maybe not. Or no, Beth Ann. Beth Ann's the racist girl. So I'm still learning all the new girls' names. Beth Ann tries to not listen to Madison when Madison's producing her, because she's trying to say, hey, talk about Muslims, which obviously sounds like a setup to say some stuff that's going to sound bad. And she tries to be like, no, I'm not going to say stuff. You're trying to make me look bad. But then all Madison does to manipulate her is say, hey, you're not allowed to look at your social media right now, but we can tell you that it's blowing up because people love that you speak your mind. You're kind of like the female Donald Trump, which, given that this episode lately aired in 2016, is a really, really pointed reference. And then she says, okay, fine then, I'll do that. And she's like really gung-ho about it. And so, yeah, we'll see how that goes. But that's episode 3 of UnReal. It was pretty good. I think the way that the two lead characters are kind of like testing and pushing each other, and like Quinn been on the warpath next season, but Rachel maybe being closely aligned with Coleman now, might just splinter their relationship further. And it's no accident that we started this season with them getting those tattoos and basically being, we're best friends forever and we've got each other's backs. It makes me think that all these war-themed titles that this season has, like, there was an assumption in episode 1 that it was Quinn versus Chet was the war, but I'm wondering if it's a civil war, if it's Quinn versus Rachel's the real war of the season until we get some resolution to it at the end. But let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Helps out a bunch if you do. Of course, you can support all the content either over at Patreon, patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, or via YouTube membership. Any support is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?